In a forgotten corner of the country, tucked between the folds of rolling hills and patches of farmland, was the small village of O'Dannel. Life there moved at the pace of rusted bicycles and barefoot children. It was here, in a weathered mud brick house with a sagging zinc roof, that the four brothers were born. Their mother, Mama Ronke, was a midwife with calloused hands and eyes that had seen too much sorrow. Her husband had died in a sawmill accident when Caleb, the youngest, was still in the womb. She raised the boys alone, with nothing but her grit, her prayers, and the legacy of a man who had loved them all deeply. Victor, the eldest, was 10 when his father died. He took it personally. He believed the burden of their survival now rested squarely on his shoulders. By 13, he was hauling wood, digging wells, and doing any work he could find. His hands grew rough, his back strong, and his heart, steely. Samuel, the second-born, was quiet and thoughtful, always clutching a dog-eared Bible under his arm. While Victor hustled to put food on the table, Samuel would be found under the mango tree, preaching to invisible congregations or scribbling sermons in an old exercise book. Daniel, the third, was a spark. With a head full of questions and eyes that missed nothing, he was the one who always asked, why? He read whatever he could find and often challenged the village elders, sometimes earning a smack, sometimes a stunned silence. Then came Caleb, the baby of the family. Mischievous and stubborn, he had a laugh that could charm snakes and a temper that burned hotter than charcoal. He adored his brothers, especially Victor, who he followed around like a shadow. They were poor, so poor that Gary was a luxury and school fees were a seasonal prayer. But they had each other. At night, they'd crowd around their mother on the mat, listening to her stories. Tales of warriors, of lost kingdoms, of men who rose from nothing. Mama Ronke never let them forget, you are sons of a lion. The world might try, but it will not swallow you. Still, hunger was a patient enemy. It wore at their strength, their dreams. One by one, they left school, not because they wanted to, but because shoes and books were too expensive. Victor quit first, followed by Samuel, then Daniel. Only Caleb finished primary school, but even he didn't make it far into secondary. By the time Victor turned 25, and Caleb had just crossed into adulthood at 18, the four brothers sat one night outside their home, staring up at a sky full of stars. The city, Victor said. It's the only way. Samuel frowned. The city is where people lose themselves. Crime, greed, sin, or where they find opportunity, Daniel countered. Caleb, chewing on a stick of sugarcane, smirked. I hear Lagos never sleeps. Victor stood. We've fought long enough in this village. We've given all we can here. Now it's time we take something back. We leave at dawn. Mama Ronke was quiet when they told her. Then she looked each of them in the eye. Go. But remember who you are. If you forget that, the city will eat you whole. The next morning, with a few change of clothes, a small bag of food, and their mother's prayers whispered into the early fog, the four brothers boarded a rickety bus and left O'Dannel behind. They had no plan, only hope. And hope, they believed, would be enough. The bus wheezed and clattered like an asthmatic giant as it crawled through towns and cities toward Lagos. It was crowded, hot, and smelled like a mix of sweat, roasted corn, and diesel. The brothers barely spoke. They were each lost in thought, clutching their meager belongings and stolen fragments of hope. When they finally arrived at Ojuelegba under the bruised orange hue of early evening, Lagos hit them like a slap. The noise was overwhelming, buses blaring horns, hawkers yelling, preachers screaming from street corners. The air tasted of metal and exhaust fumes. Nothing was still. Nothing was gentle. They found shelter in a cramped one-room shack in a slum near Mushin, offered by an old acquaintance from O'Dannel who barely remembered their names. It had a leaking roof, a cracked floor, and cockroaches that scuttled freely like they paid rent. Still, it was a place to sleep. For days, they wandered the streets searching for work. Victor, with his build and stoic face, managed to secure a job loading goods at a warehouse in Apapa. The pay was pitiful, but it was something. He came home every night covered in sweat and grime, barely speaking, only collapsing on the mat and sleeping until dawn. Samuel joined a small evangelical ministry that preached near the bus parks. He handed out tracts and sang with the choir in the evenings. People gave offerings sometimes, small naira notes and leftover food. He never complained, only quoted scriptures that gave them courage. Daniel walked from one government office to another, trying to find a clerical position, an internship, anything. His literacy and charm helped him land a temporary assistant job at a local go. He started reading more about politics, about inequality, about the broken systems choking the nation. But it was Caleb who struggled the most. Too young for most labor jobs and too proud to beg, he drifted toward boys who hung around street corners with expensive phones and flashy shoes. He watched how they moved, how money passed into their pockets. It fascinated him, the speed, the freedom. One of them, a boy named Raji, took a liking to him. "You get hard," Raji said one night. "That's what it takes." Caleb didn't know what it was, not fully. But he wanted in. Meanwhile, the brothers began to grow apart. Schedules clashed. Arguments started. Money was always short. Tension simmered like heat beneath a closed pot. "You can't keep preaching while we starve," Victor barked one night, throwing down his shirt after work. "How many prayers will put food on this table?" Samuel didn't flinch. "And how many loads will you carry before your back breaks?" Faith feeds the soul. Daniel tried to play mediator. "We need to work together. Set a plan. We can't just scatter." But they were already scattering. One day, Victor came home to find Caleb missing. Again, he didn't say where he was going. He asked Samuel. He said not to wait up. Victor slammed his fist on the wall. "That boy is walking into fire." A week later, Caleb came home with a new pair of sneakers and a smirk. "Why suffer when money is moving all around us?" Victor stood up. "Where did you get those shoes?" Caleb rolled his eyes. "Relax, bro. I didn't kill anybody." Samuel stepped in. "That's not the point. This life you're chasing, it leads to ruin. You think quoting Bible verses will change anything?" Caleb snapped. Victor gritted his teeth. "If I catch you doing anything illegal, you'll what? Beat me? Send me back to the village?" The room fell silent. It was the first time Caleb had dared Victor like that. Daniel sat on the edge of the mat, watching the cracks in the ceiling. "This city is eating us," he murmured. No one replied. Weeks turned into months. Seasons shifted. Lagos didn't get easier, it only got faster. Victor climbed the ranks in the warehouse, eventually catching the eye of a businessman named Chief Obasola, who offered him a role managing logistics for his imports. It paid better, but the deals were shady, and the paperwork didn't always add up. Samuel started holding his own revival meetings, drawing small crowds. He rented a hall in Agage and preached every Sunday. He believed revival was coming, and that it had to start with him. Daniel became more involved in politics. He wrote articles for online platforms, joined protests, and soon found himself on the radar of government agents. He started sleeping with one eye open. Caleb. He became Raji's right hand. They ran errands, delivered packages, collected debts. Sometimes they carried weapons. One night, Caleb came home with blood on his sleeve. He said it wasn't his. Victor confronted him again, this time more violently. "You want to bring police to this door. I will not go to prison because of you." Caleb laughed bitterly. "You think your hands are clean, big brother. You think your boss is holy." Samuel prayed harder. Daniel watched with worry. The bond that had once been their strength was now a fraying rope. But even ropes can snap. It happened on a rainy Thursday. The clouds had been threatening since dawn, but Lagos refused to slow down. Thunder rolled across the sky as Victor sat in Chief Obasola's office, flipping through invoices and delivery slips. His tie felt too tight. His conscience tighter. "Victor," Chief Obasola said, leaning back in his leather chair. "You've done well for me. Loyal, quiet, efficient. Thank you, sir. That's why I'm giving you a bigger role. There's a shipment coming next week. Customs doesn't need to see everything inside, you understand." Victor hesitated. "Sir, I've always handled logistics. This sounds different." It is. And it pays differently. Chief Obasola's eyes glinted. Do this right, and you're set for life. Victor left the office with a heavy heart and a briefcase full of unasked questions. The city was molding him into something he didn't recognize, and yet, he liked the power. The influence. The money. He wasn't sure where the line was anymore. That evening, he returned to the shack, soaked and exhausted, only to find the front door kicked open and a mess inside. Daniel sat in a corner, bruised and shaken. Samuel stood near the doorway, fists clenched, eyes red. What happened? Victor demanded. Police came, Daniel rasped. Looking for Caleb. Victor's stomach dropped. Why? Samuel answered, voice tight with rage. They say he was part of a robbery in Surulere. A man died. Victor grabbed the wall to steady himself. He wasn't here, Daniel added. They tore the place apart anyway. Victor turned and walked into the night, rain pounding down. He called every contact he had, every friend, every old neighbor. Nothing. Caleb had vanished. 3 days passed with no word. Then, a call came. A withheld number. Victor picked up. Hello. Big bro. Caleb's voice was cracked, rushed. I messed up. Where are you? No time. I'm sorry. I didn't shoot anyone. I swear. But I was there. It was supposed to be quick. No one was meant to get hurt. But something went wrong. Victor paced, heart racing. Come home. We'll fix this. I can't. They'll kill me, or lock me away. Raji's gone. I saw his body. Caleb, listen to me. Click. The line went dead. Victor stared at his phone. For the first time in years, he felt like the powerless boy he'd once been, watching his family unravel, unable to stop it. 2 nights later, Caleb appeared at the shack, gaunt, shivering, and bleeding from a gash on his leg. Samuel and Daniel froze. Victor pulled him inside and slammed the door. Are you mad? The police. I had nowhere else to go, Caleb whispered. They cleaned his wound. Samuel wrapped it with strips of an old t-shirt, muttering prayers under his breath. No one slept that night. Morning came too fast. By 7 a.m., the police were outside, banging on the door. This is the Nigeria police. Open up. Caleb panicked. I'll run. No. Daniel grabbed him. You'll be shot in the back. Victor turned to Samuel. You still know that pastor in Ikorodu? Samuel nodded slowly. Victor made a decision. They smuggled Caleb out wrapped in a mat, paid a bike rider to take him halfway, then used back roads to get him to the pastor's home. It was risky, but it worked. For now. Meanwhile, Daniel's activism caught dangerous attention. He had published an exposé on a corrupt senator and was now receiving threats. They sent someone to my office, he told Victor. Said I should mind my words before I lose my tongue. Stop writing, Victor urged. You're not invincible. And you are. With all your dirty shipments. Victor's jaw tightened. You don't know what I do. I know enough. And Samuel knows too. The brothers stared at each other, accusation, fear, pride. Samuel spoke from the corner. You both need to stop before we lose what's left of us. But things were already slipping. That night, Victor received a call from Chief Obasola. Customs intercepted the container. We have a leak. Handle it, or you're the scapegoat. Victor knew what handle it meant. Eliminate the leak. He stood in front of the mirror, hands shaking, staring at the man he had become. Mama Ronki's voice echoed in his mind. You are sons of a lion. The world might try, but it will not swallow you. Had he already been swallowed? The following week, Samuel gathered them all, Victor, Daniel, even Caleb, smuggled back temporarily under the cover of night. We need to talk, he said. Really talk. The room was quiet. I had a dream, he said. Mama was crying. She said, find your way back. I think we're at the edge. Victor laughed bitterly. You think a dream will fix this? No. But confession might. Repentance. Forgiveness. Daniel rubbed his face. Even if we do, what then? We leave Lagos, Samuel said. All of us. Victor scoffed. And do what? Start selling yams. Start again. No one escapes this city, Samuel. But Caleb looked up. Maybe he's right. Victor turned. You're the last person who should talk about escape. I've seen what's on the other side. And I don't want to go back. The brothers sat in silence. Then Samuel spoke softly. We left O'Dannel to change our lives. But maybe we brought the village's pain with us. The decision wasn't easy, but slowly, they began to disentangle themselves. Victor gathered enough evidence on Chief Obasola and struck a deal with a rival businessman. It was dangerous, but it got him out of the operation clean, barely. Daniel left Lagos for Abuja, joining a larger, more secure political movement. He went quiet for a time, changed his phone number, began organizing from behind the scenes. Samuel sold his small ministry hall and used the money to help rehabilitate Caleb, who joined a youth program under the same church. It wasn't easy. He relapsed once. But he came back. It took a year for things to settle. A year of careful steps. A year of apologies, of therapy, of late-night calls, and prayers. Then, one day, Victor got a letter. Handwritten. From Mama Ronki. My boys, it read. Come home. The road back to O'Dannel was different than the one they had taken years ago. This time, it felt like a return, not an escape. Victor, now 34, sat behind the wheel of a modest used car, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Beside him, Samuel rode with a Bible in his lap, fingers tracing the frayed edges of its pages. In the back seat, Daniel typed away on a laptop, still working remotely with reform groups in Abuja. Caleb, now calm and noticeably matured, leaned his head against the window, listening to a gospel song humming through the speakers. They had not been back in 8 years. O'Dannel welcomed them with red dust and open skies. Children ran barefoot along the road. An old man waved from the front of the village's tiny post office. It was all the same, and yet, not. Their old house stood stoic at the edge of the village, with its cracked mud walls and crooked roof. Mama Ronki sat on a wooden stool in the compound, shelling groundnuts into a rusty tray. She looked up as the car approached and squinted. Then, she rose slowly. One by one, they stepped out of the car. Victor, she whispered. He ran to her and dropped to his knees. Mama. She touched his head. My son, you came back. The reunion was quiet. Tears, laughter, embraces. No one said much. Words were too small. That night, they sat around a fire, just like old times. But this time, the stories were different. Victor spoke first. I nearly became something I couldn't live with. But I walked away. It cost me everything I built, but I'm still standing. Samuel nodded. I was preaching to others, but I hadn't forgiven myself for abandoning Mama. I thought faith alone would fix things. I forgot about action. Daniel looked up from the flames. I've seen corruption that starts from the soil and goes all the way to the sky. But I've also seen good people fighting back. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Caleb leaned forward. I saw a man die because of me. I can't undo that, but I can make sure no other boy follows the same path. Mama Ronki watched them with wet eyes. You all went into the world and found pain. But you also found yourselves. They sat in silence, listening to the distant sounds of crickets and the gentle rustle of trees. In the weeks that followed, they began to rebuild the house, piece by piece. The community watched with curiosity. Then, one day, Victor called a meeting in the village square. We left here to chase success, he began. We found some. We lost some. But we've come back with a vision. He outlined the plan: a community center with a library, a youth program, vocational training, and a cooperative fund for farmers. Many young men are leaving because they see no hope here. But hope isn't found, it's built. The village murmured. Some doubted. Some hoped. Samuel spoke next. I will lead counseling sessions. For those who've lost faith, or feel forgotten. Daniel added, we'll bring volunteers from the cities, lawyers, doctors, teachers. We'll link O'Dannel with change makers. Even Caleb stood and shared his story. He didn't glorify the streets. He spoke plainly, honestly. His scars were visible, but so was his healing. By the end of the meeting, applause rang through the square. The community center rose faster than anyone expected. Victor used the money he'd quietly saved over the years. Daniel tapped into his activist network. Samuel mobilized the local churches. Caleb, surprisingly, became one of the best youth mentors, raw, real, and fearless. The center opened 6 months later. On the first day, Mama Ronki stood beside her 4 sons, surrounded by villagers. Her voice cracked as she prayed. "These were boys once," she said. "Now they are builders." One evening, long after the center had opened, Victor and Samuel sat alone outside, watching the sunset. "Do you ever regret it?" Samuel asked. "The path we took," Victor sighed. "Sometimes. But I think, if we hadn't gone through it, we wouldn't have become this." Samuel nodded. Pain can shape purpose. Just then, Caleb emerged from the center, laughing with a group of teens. Daniel followed behind, holding papers, gesturing excitedly. Victor smiled. "Look at them." Samuel grinned. 4 brothers. Still standing. But life never moves in straight lines. A few months later, news came. Chief Obasola had been arrested. His empire was collapsing. His allies were being hunted. Victor received a warning. "You might be pulled in." He called Daniel and Samuel. "If I go down, protect the center. Protect Caleb." Samuel placed a hand on his shoulder. "We won't let that happen." Victor hired a lawyer. Released files he had quietly kept. Evidence that showed his efforts to cut ties with Obasola, documents that exonerated him. Still, he was summoned to Lagos for questioning. It lasted weeks. The center struggled in his absence. Donations slowed. Caleb, overwhelmed, nearly relapsed. But he didn't. He stood firm. "Victor's done enough for me. Now it's my turn." When Victor returned, cleared of all charges, the entire village celebrated. But he didn't smile. Not yet. That night, he stood alone under the stars. Samuel found him there. "You okay?" Victor nodded. I finally understand what Mama meant." Samuel waited. "She said we're sons of a lion. That the world might try, but it will not swallow us. I didn't get it then. But now I know." He looked at his brother. "We are not survivors. We are builders." The rains returned to O'Dannel, heavy and persistent, soaking the red earth and filling the village wells to the brim. But unlike the years when the floods brought fear and hunger, this season brought something else: growth. The community center, now painted in bright colors with murals of farmers, books, and hopeful youth, had become the village's heart. Teenagers who once dreamed only of escape now talked about building farms, launching businesses, or studying law. Mothers brought their babies for free checkups at the clinic room Samuel had helped establish. Farmers met weekly to share tips and pool savings. The center was alive. Victor had become a respected figure in the region. His experience in logistics and leadership turned him into an informal consultant for nearby villages, helping them manage cooperative schemes. He spoke little of Lagos. But his scars, emotional and otherwise, were evident in his thoughtful silence, in how he never let a child go hungry in his sight. Samuel's counseling program expanded. He trained volunteers from the church and beyond. His sermons were softer now, less thunder and more healing. He no longer preached from a place of fear but from a place of lived grace. Daniel divided his time between Abuja and O'Dannel. Though he declined several invitations to run for office, his political influence had grown. He ensured laws impacting rural communities were debated in the right rooms. He used his name to open doors, but used his roots to guide what passed through them. Caleb remained the biggest surprise. The same boy who once ran with street gangs now managed the Youth Empowerment Unit. He led workshops on street smarts, second chances, and finding your voice in chaos. The boys in the village idolized him, not because he was perfect, but because he had survived. One quiet afternoon, all 4 brothers sat outside their rebuilt home, now plastered and painted. Mama Ronki sat in her wooden chair, her eyes closed, her hands folded in prayer. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The wind carried the sounds of children playing, hammers knocking from a new roof nearby, a girl reading aloud from a storybook. It was the sound of redemption. You remember that day we left? Caleb said, smiling. We were so sure Lagos was the answer. Daniel chuckled. It gave us questions instead. And those questions made us who we are, Victor added. Samuel looked at each of them. We were broken boys. But we chose not to stay broken. Caleb raised a glass of palm wine. To the road that taught us, and to the soil that took us back. They clinked glasses. A year later, tragedy knocked, but gently. Mama Ronki passed away in her sleep, beneath the mango tree behind the house. The whole village came to her funeral. Her coffin was carved with care. Her grave, placed near the old well she used to draw from, was covered in white flowers. She died at peace, the village chief said during the service. Because her sons came home. Victor read her favorite psalm. Samuel sang her favorite hymn. Daniel gave a moving tribute. And Caleb, voice shaking, said only this. She was the lion we came from. Years passed. The brothers grew older. Victor eventually married a schoolteacher from Abeokuta. They had 2 children and built a modest home next to the community center. Samuel opened a small counseling clinic near the market square. He never married but was called Baba Faith by nearly every child in the village. Daniel remained a bridge between the grassroots and the government. Though he refused to wear Ogbata or campaign for himself, he helped dozens of honest men and women get elected. And Caleb. He opened a music studio in the village for creative youth, named Second Chance Sounds. He also wrote a book, The Boy Who Left and Came Back. It became a bestseller. One evening, 20 years after they first left for Lagos, the 4 brothers stood side by side at the top of the small hill overlooking Odanel. The village was bigger now. Brighter. The center had expanded into a school. A small hospital had replaced the clinic. Roads had improved. Young people stayed now, because they saw a future. I never thought we'd see this day, Daniel said softly. Victor nodded. We didn't just survive. We changed something. We changed ourselves, Caleb added. Samuel smiled. And through us, 1,000 others changed. They stood in silence as the sun dipped behind the trees. A breeze passed through the leaves. Victor closed his eyes and whispered, we were once lost boys. Samuel echoed, but we found our way. Caleb finished it, and we made home better than how we left it. Daniel, ever the last word, simply said, let history remember the 4 brothers, not for what they fled, but for what they built. And together, they walked back down the hill, not as 4 lost boys, but as 4 men who found each other again. The end.